I have honestly been unsure on how to approach this video, but I knew it had to happen eventually, preferably before the end of the year. So I went into my Dustborn Let's Play with the goal of giving the game a fair chance. I like to judge games based on their story, characters, and gameplay, and the latest internet discourse has made it hard to identify which games are actually bad and which games are just being hated on. But for Dustborn, I now have the answer. It is honestly just bad. I won't be finishing the Let's Play. I had a recording error which would require me to do some re-recording, and I just cannot be arsed to do that. I'm simply not having fun with the game. Though that said, I have managed to see the ending and I know where the story goes and which characters we meet along the way. So I think it's high time we talk about Dustborn. Let's start with what the game does well. The art style is quite good, both in the in-game sequences and also the comic book between the chapters. I especially like the comic book. The concept of using words as sort of magic, referred to as vox, is creative and fun in theory. And the voice acting is actually good. I just think that no matter how great voice actors you get, they won't be able to fix the writing. And the writing really drags it down. Because Dustborn is a game that doesn't know what it wants to be. Early on I thought it might be a parody, but now I'm not sure. If it's meant to be a parody, it's poorly executed. The jokes fall flat and the potential satire is taken so far that it stops being clever and becomes tiresome. But if it's meant to be a piece of social commentary, then it misses the mark entirely. And either way, whatever they were trying to do, they did not succeed. Dustborn is the story of Pax, an Anomal, someone who can use words like magic in this world. Think X-Men because some of the characters have more physical abilities, even though these are all connected to words. Or are meant to do that? It's not quite clear all of the time. So Pax and her group have stolen an important package which they don't know much about and are tasked with delivering it across America while posing as a punk rock band. It is a strange setup, but video games have been built on stranger concepts. So the problem is not the idea but the execution. You see, the first issue with Dustborn is its characters, starting with Pax. She is a highly unlikable protagonist. Her baseline is to be rather mean and broody. And while broody characters are common in video games, Pax lacks the redeeming qualities that most of them have, making her simply unlikable. You can push her to make better choices, but her baseline personality is just unpleasant. Now at the start of the game, Pax is traveling with 3 companions and a robot she really dislikes. The companions are Theo, Gnome, and Sai. And honestly, if the game focused solely on Theo and Gnome, it might have been so much better. Theo is the only non-Anomal in the group. He is a genuinely sweet guy with his own agenda and very little ties to the group, so through the story you're wondering if he's on our side or not. Gnome is a non-binary character struggling with their own issues, and they actually have the most interesting vocal ability, which is to soothe people, which could be used in interesting ways in dialogue. Pax, on the other hand, unlocks several vocal abilities, all centered around harming people or causing discord. Even the names of these abilities, trigger, bully, gaslighting, seem kinda designed to provoke controversy. I'm not sure why these names were picked for these abilities, but it felt like it was meant to cause people to have a negative association to them. Now, Pax herself is clearly intended to be a strong hero fighting against an unjust world, but she comes more off as a hypocritical and mean person. She can use her powers both against her enemies but also against her friends, and at certain points you're kind of forced to do so. And it's uncomfortable and makes her feel often more abusive than heroic. And then the final character of the starting 4 is Sai. Sai's character is a mess. Her power is super strength and the ability to turn into stone, which makes her nervous about being outed as an Anomal, because she doesn't seem to control the ability fully, which is kinda weird considering it's supposed to be voice-based. So her ability doesn't match with the other ones, and it made the whole Vox situation kinda confusing from the very start, as the rules are kinda vague. But this anxiety could have been a great character arc, and is meant to be because the game does try to focus a little bit on it. But where she falls flat is that she seems to be the character that was meant to be most diverse. You see, I enjoy diverse characters in games, I just don't want them to feel like a joke or overly heavy-handed. But Sai feels like someone was trying to create a joke character, and I do not like that. She has vitiligo, she is Native American, she is a Muslim, and she has asthma. And while all of that could make an interesting character, Sai's identity just feels overdone, with nearly every conversation kinda highlighting one of these traits. It comes off as heavy-handed, and with Sai being very reserved in the first half of the game, she simply failed as a character I could connect with. Now there are other characters that join the group, and they are a mix of alright to pretty annoying, but all of them seem to suffer from some sort of over-design, be it visual or character-wise. But let's talk about the story and gameplay. The journey across America has its moments, with few interesting locations to explore, and like many narrative-driven games, gameplay consists of exploring areas, talking to characters, and solving puzzles to progress the story. And dialogue choices are actually not bad in this game, especially when talking with your companions, as each conversation helps push them into one of several sort of personality types they can become throughout the game. And which personality type they end up being will actually affect their ending, a detail I quite like. But the dialogue often misses the mark with its humor, and while occasionally there were some chuckle-worthy moments, I found myself more often just cringing. There's also a weird lack of other characters adding on to dialogue. For example, early in the game, one of the characters that joins you is Siggy, who is Pax's sister. During the first night at camp, when everyone is sitting around at the campfire, Siggy turns extremely mean towards Pax and basically claims that everyone here is simply because Pax forced them to be here. And while everyone is sitting right there, nobody speaks up. Because when you're having dialogue with one character, none of the other characters will be part of it. Which made the moment feel even more awkward, because then you go around and talking to everyone else and they all just act as if Siggy had not said this in front of all of them. And it made it feel like I wasn't really talking to a character around other characters, but that the conversations were sort of happening in a vacuum. But while the gameplay is mostly talking and exploring, it is sometimes broken up by minigames and combat. Let's start with the minigames. The main one is the music. After all, the group is undercover as a band. Not a good band, but still they must show up to predetermined gigs and play their music. At the start of the game you will have one song, but during downtime in the story, Pax can sit down with a guitar and write more. I can't say that any of the songs are particularly good. In fact, most of them are quite bad. They come off as something an edgy 13-year-old would find quite deep and makes my adult self cringe in the most unpleasant ways, especially because a lot of the lyrics are political to the world the game is happening in. And the goal is to keep a low profile while going through an area where we are warned that the people there don't really like politics in their entertainment. And still Pax keeps on writing and playing songs that are more controversial, especially in this specific region, which makes it hard to take the whole undercover bit seriously. Now, while playing the music, you get a written minigame, which I did not like, but I did not hate. I simply never got really good at it. Though I do appreciate that when I messed up, the band would mess up as well, with Pax coughing or the music being out of sync to show that my performance actually mattered to some degree. The other minigames are mostly aim and click minigames, just painted in different skins. They aren't anything special, but they did an alright job in adding some diversity. And then there is the combat. I loathe the combat. I don't know who decided to add combat into this game, but it was honestly a mistake, and I think even the developer knows that it was a mistake, because after the first fight, the game asks you if you want less or more combat. I chose less combat, and it still felt like way too much. And part of the combat issue is that you will struggle to die. As long as multiple enemies aren't just beating you up at the same time, you will passively out-heal pretty much everything. And while you can use your vocal abilities in the fights, which gives them some interest, it also has the issue that the game never wants you to experiment with anything on your own. So entering combat with also a new vocal ability means at some point the combat will pause to give you a tutorial about the new vocal ability, even if you have used it already in the combat. And then there is the constant talking during the fights. Apparently, Pax fights better if she's having banter with the enemies. And this banter is not good, it is just annoying. The enemies will banter back. This dialogue is not funny, it is just annoying. And the worst part is that this will be explained every single time a new character joins the group, as they will ask about why Pax is talking. Or in other cases, the enemies will ask why Pax is talking, and someone in the group will helpfully explain that Pax fights better if she's talking. Around the fourth time this was explained to me, I was well over it. The fights being boring to begin with, and this ongoing talking during the fights just made them feel longer, which was not fun at all. Now, as I went further into the story, it never really picked up. If anything, it got more confusing and convoluted towards the end. And the game finishes on what the developers probably thought was a really cool ending. And for me, it felt kinda underwhelming and not very fun. The main interest at the end for me was just what happened to the companions based on how I treated them so far. But mainly, I was just glad it was over. And well, that's Dustborn. While it has some good ideas and moments, the poor execution, unlikable protagonist, and frustrating gameplay makes it a chore to play. And so, is it worth playing? Absolutely not. If you're looking for a good story-driven game, I would recommend things like The Walking Dead Season 1, Life is Strange 1, Detroit Become Human, Oxenfree, or Tell Me Why. These are all games in a similar genre that are way more worthy of your time. But that's just my opinion. So what do you think? Let's talk about it down in the comments, and while you're there, make sure to subscribe and sacrifice the like button to the algorithmic overlords. En in the end, all I want to say is takk fyrir að horfa og eigðu yndislegan dag.